The Grand Assembly Hall floated in the darkness of space, a massive station shaped like a silver flower with 1,000 petals. It orbited the neutral moon of Vesa Prime, where no species could claim ownership. Inside its great chamber, representatives from 300 worlds sat in rising circles. Their seats carved from stone brought from their home planets. Light fell from above like gentle rain. The air carried the mixed scents of 100 different atmospheres. Ambassador Tayuna stood at the central platform. Her black hair pulled back tight, her uniform crisp and gray. She was not tall, but something in her eyes made others look away. Behind her sat the human delegation, 12 men and women who had crossed the stars to speak for their kind. 87 years ago, humanity had joined this council. 87 years of service, sacrifice, and silence. Today, that silence would end. High Speaker Alum raised his forearms for quiet. He was ancient, his blue skin wrinkled like old paper, his voice thin but still commanding. We gather to vote on Resolution 7749, known as the Restriction Act. This resolution proposes limits on human military presence and expansion across council space. Tayuna felt her jaw tighten. She had read the resolution. Every word of it burned in her memory. Councillor Veth rose from his seat among the Mirathi delegation. He was tall and proud, his scales shimmering green and gold under the lights. The Mirathi had ruled half the galaxy before humans ever left their small blue world. They had never forgiven humanity for rising so fast. The evidence is clear, Veth said, his voice smooth as oil. Humans breed quickly. They spread quickly. They build weapons of terrible power. If we do not act now, they will swallow us all. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Tayuna watched the faces around her. Fear, suspicion, old prejudice dressed in new words. High Speaker. Alum nodded slowly. Ambassador Tay, you may respond. Tayuna stepped forward. She carried no notes. She needed none. In 87 years, she began, her voice calm and clear. Humanity has mediated 14 major conflicts between council species. We have contributed 40% of all logistics and transport across council space. Our doctors have cured diseases that plagued your worlds for centuries. We shared every cure freely. We asked for nothing in return. She paused, letting the words settle. When the Velith faced famine, human ships carried grain across 3 sectors. When the Mirathi mining stations collapsed, human engineers rebuilt them. When pirates threatened your borders, human soldiers bled and died to protect colonies that were not our own. Councillor Veth laughed, a cold and ugly sound. And we thank you for your service. But servants must know their place. The chamber went quiet. Tayuna stared at him. Something changed in her eyes. Something hard and final. Servants, she repeated softly. Admiral Kong Ho sat in the front row of the human delegation. He was a large man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands. He had fought in 3 wars for the council. He had buried friends on worlds whose names he could not pronounce. Now he watched Veth smile, and his fists closed slowly. His servants? Veth continued, enjoying himself now. Useful laborers, nothing more. You humans are good at working. Good at following orders. But leadership? Wisdom? These are not your gifts. Their delegates shifted in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable. Others nodded in agreement. The Mirathi had powerful friends. Tayuna's communicator buzzed against her wrist. She glanced down at the message. 3 words glowed on the screen. Authorization granted. She had sent the request to Earth's United Parliament 2 days ago. If the vote went against humanity, if the council chose to chain them, what should she do? The Parliament had debated through the night. Now they had answered. Tayuna looked up at the thousands of faces watching her. Allies who had become strangers. Friends who saw her people as tools. She thought of the human soldiers dying on distant borders. The human doctors working without rest. The human engineers keeping old stations running with wire and hope. 80-7 years of service. And this was their reward. She reached up and removed her diplomatic insignia, the small silver pin that marked her as humanity's voice. She held it in her palm for a moment, feeling its weight. "Hi, Speaker Alum," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Counselor Veth, distinguished representatives." The hall fell silent. Something in her tone made hearts beat faster. For 87 years, humanity has given everything to this council. Our labor, our genius, our blood. We asked only to be treated as equals, to be seen as partners in building a better galaxy. She closed her fingers around the pin. Instead, you see servants, laborers, animals to be leashed and controlled. She opened her hand and let the pin fall. It hit the stone floor with a sound like a bell. Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted. Some rose to their feet. High Speaker Olam struck his staff against the ground, calling for order that would not come. Counselor Veth laughed again, but this time the sound was uncertain. "You cannot be serious. You need us. Your colonies depend on Council trade routes. Your ships use Council fuel stations." Tayuna turned to face him one last time. "You are about to learn, Counselor, exactly who needed whom?" She walked toward the exit. The human delegation rose as one and followed her. Admiral Kung Ho paused at the door, looking back at the chaos they left behind. Part of him wanted to stay, to fight, to make them understand. But some lessons could only be taught through absence. The great doors closed behind them with a boom that echoed through the hall. The human delegation walked in silence through the silver corridors of the station. Their footsteps rang against the metal floor. Outside the station windows, stars burned cold and bright. Human ships waited in the darkness, their engines ready, their crews prepared. Tayuna stopped at a viewport and stared at the galaxy spread before her. Somewhere out there, human colonies waited for news. Human soldiers stood ready. Human scientists worked in labs, and human farmers tended alien soil. And human children slept without knowing that everything was about to change. Admiral Kong Ho stepped beside her. "Do you think they understand what they've done?" Tayuna shook her head slowly. "Not yet, but they will." Behind them, alarms began to sound. Emergency lights flashed. The council was already panicking, already sending messages, already realizing that the workers they had dismissed were walking away, and the galaxy would never be the same. Tayuna turned from the window and walked toward the human ships. Her people followed. They did not look back. Some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt, and some lessons could only be learned in fire. The human fleet powered up their engines and turned toward home. Behind them, the great station grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among the stars. The withdrawal had begun. 3 weeks passed like a slow nightmare. Across the galaxy, human ships began their journey home. They left quietly, without anger, without drama. They simply packed their things and flew away. And everywhere they left, something began to break. Captain Han Jae stood on the bridge of the medical frigate Yunha. The ship was old but well-loved, painted white with a red cross on its hull that every species recognized. For 12 years, Han Jae had commanded this vessel. He had saved more lives than he could count. Now he watched the green and brown planet below and felt his heart grow heavy. Sen-Nara, a beautiful world of endless farms and gentle people. 2 million souls lived there, growing food that fed a dozen other colonies. Han Jae knew many of them by name. His communications officer spoke. "Captain Governor Rethi is requesting to board?" Han Jae nodded. "Let her come." Governor Rethi arrived 20 minutes later, climbing from a small shuttle with shaking hands. She was Velith, with soft gray skin and large dark eyes that glistened with tears. She had governed Senara for 30 years. In all that time, humans had been her partners, her friends. "Captain Han," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, you cannot leave us." Han Jae led her to the observation deck. Below them, Senara turned slowly. Fields of golden grain stretched across the continents. Rivers sparkled like silver threads. It looked peaceful from up here. It looked safe. Our water purification systems, Rethi continued desperately. They are human technology. Our engineers have maintained them, but they do not truly understand how they work. If something breaks, if something fails—" She did not finish. She did not need to. Hanjay understood perfectly. Without clean water, 2 million people would begin to die within weeks. "I have orders," Hanjay said quietly. "All human personnel are to withdraw. No exceptions." Rethi grabbed his arm. "Your orders come from humans. Change them. Override them. You have always helped us before." Hanjay gently removed her hand. He walked to a storage compartment and pulled out 2 heavy cases. Inside were water purification tablets, enough for 3 months. Beside them lay a thick book of technical manuals, translated into Velith. "This is what I can give you," he said. "Supplies to keep you alive while you learn. Instructions to maintain your systems. Everything you need to survive on your own." Rethi stared at the cases. "This is not enough. We need you. We need humans." Hanjay met her eyes. "We taught you how, Governor. We always taught you how. But you never wanted to learn. You were happy to let us do the work while you enjoyed the results." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "It is time you learned." Rethi left the Yunha with the cases clutched to her chest. Hanjay watched her shuttle descend toward the planet, growing smaller and smaller until it vanished into the clouds. Behind him, Dr. Park Meena entered the observation deck. She was the ship's chief xenobiologist, a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She had trained half the doctors on Sonara. "The medical staff planetside are begging us to stay," she said softly. "They say they are not ready." Hanjay did not turn from the window. "Are they right?" Meena was quiet for a long moment. "They know everything we taught them. They have the skills. They have the knowledge." She paused. "They lack only confidence." "Then this will teach them confidence." The Yunha broke orbit an hour later. Dr. Park Meena stood at the airlock as they departed, watching her alien colleagues gather on the landing platform below. Some waved. Some wept. One young Velith doctor raised her hand in the human gesture of farewell. The gesture Meena had taught her. Meena whispered words that no one could hear. "We wanted to belong. You made us feel like guests who overstayed." The planet fell away. The stars welcomed them home, far across the galaxy. Trade Minister Kael sat in his office on the Mirathi homeworld and watched the numbers on his screen grow worse by the hour. He was a practical man, not given to panic. But what he saw now made his scales turn pale. 60% of interstellar shipping had relied on human crews. Human navigators who knew the treacherous routes between stars. Human engineers who kept the ancient jump gates running. Human captains who could coax one more voyage from failing engines. Now they were gone. All of them. Freighters sat dead in ports with no one qualified to fly them. Food rotted in cargo holds. Medicine spoiled. Machinery rusted. The great flowing river of commerce that connected 1,000 worlds had suddenly dried up. KYE pulled up reports from across Marathi space. A factory on Tithfor had shut down because spare parts could not be delivered. A hospital on Ven Prime had run out of surgical supplies. 3 colonies were rationing food, and it had only been 3 weeks. His assistant entered, carrying more bad news. "Minister, the jump gate at Sector 9 has failed. The human maintenance team departed yesterday. Our engineers are attempting repairs, but..." She did not finish. They both knew what it meant. Without that gate, an entire region of space was cut off. Ships that should take days to arrive would now take months. Kyle thought of Counselor Veth standing in the Great Hall, laughing at the human ambassador. Useful laborers? Nothing more. He wondered if Veth was laughing now, on a station at the edge of council space. A Mirathi freighter captain named Den stared at his empty crew roster. His ship was loaded with grain bound for hungry colonies. His engines were ready. His route was plotted, but his human navigator had left. His human engineer had left. His human cook, who somehow turned ship rations into meals worth eating, had left. Den had flown ships for 40 years. He had never realized how much he depended on his human crewmates until they were gone. He tried to launch anyway. The ship made it 2 jumps before the engines began to fail. Without a skilled engineer, Den could not repair them. He drifted in empty space for 6 days before rescue arrived. By then, the grain had spoiled. 10,000 people on 3 worlds would go hungry because of one ship's failure. And there were hundreds of ships just like his all across the galaxy. The humans had not fired a single weapon. They had not made a single threat. They had simply walked away. And the galaxy was beginning to understand what that meant. In the halls of the Galactic Council, High Speaker Olam sat alone in his chambers, reading reports that grew darker by the day. He had served the Council for 60 years. He had guided it through wars and plagues and disasters, but he had never seen anything like this the humans had woven themselves into. Everything. Transportation, medicine, engineering, diplomacy, peacekeeping. They had made themselves essential not through force, but through service. And now that service had ended, Olam remembered the human ambassador standing in the great hall. Her voice calm, her eyes cold. He remembered the sound of her pin hitting the floor. He had thought she was bluffing. He had thought the humans would come back in a few days, apologizing, begging to return. He had been wrong. Outside his window, the stars burned on, indifferent to the suffering below. Somewhere out there, human ships were heading home, and the galaxy they left behind was beginning to fall apart. Olam closed his eyes and wondered how everything had gone so wrong. The answer, of course, was simple. They had forgotten that servants are only servants until they decide to stop serving, and by then, it is always too late. 2 months after the humans walked away, the galaxy learned what darkness truly meant. General Baisong stood at the command center of New Busan, a human colony world far from council space. Through the great windows, he could see rolling hills covered in purple grass and forests of silver trees. Human children played in the streets below. Human families lived in peace, protected by the greatest military the galaxy had ever seen. A military that now sat idle while the universe burned. Analyst Choi Ara approached him, a datapad clutched in her hands. She was young but brilliant, responsible for monitoring communications across known space. What she had heard in the past 2 months had aged her 10 years. "General," she said quietly, "the situation is getting worse." Bei Soon did not turn from the window. "Tell me." Choi Ara pulled up the reports. "The Outer Veil factions have organized under a warlord named Dren. Without human patrols on the borders, they've begun raiding council colonies. 3 Mirathi mining stations destroyed this week alone." And the Mirathi response? Choi Ara hesitated. "They sent a fleet. 40 ships against Dren's 20. She paused. "They lost." Baisung finally turned. "They outnumbered him 2 to 1. "How did they lose?" "Their targeting systems," Choi Ara explained. "Human engineers designed them. Human technicians maintained them. The Mirathi military never bothered to learn the code. When we left, the systems stopped receiving updates. Dren's raiders flew circles around them." Bei Soon closed his eyes. He remembered the Mirathi commanders he had trained over the years, proud warriors who sneered at human suggestions. Officers who believed their ancient military traditions made them superior. They had treated human advisors as servants, useful but beneath respect. Now their ships drifted dead in space, and their crews floated among the stars. What else? Bei Soon asked. Choi Ara scrolled through her data. Communications intercepts. "I've recorded messages from 47 different species in the past week alone. All of them asking the same thing." She played one of the recordings. A desperate voice, speaking in heavily accented Common. "Please, we need human help. Our defenses are failing. Our people are dying. We know we made mistakes. Please come back." Another voice, this one weeping. "The raiders took our children. The council cannot protect us. Only humans ever could. Why did you leave us?" And another, cold with fury. "The Mirathi did this. The Mirathi drove you away. Make them pay. But please, do not make us pay for their sins." Baisong listened to message after message. "Please, prayers, curses. The galaxy crying out for the humans they had. Dismissed, he felt nothing. Archive them all, he said, but do not respond. Choi Era stared at him. General, some of these colonies have been allies for decades. Good people. Innocent people. Innocent people who stood silent when their council voted to chain us. Baesung's voice was hard. Innocent people who clapped when Counselor Veth called us servants. They made their choice. Now, they live with it. He walked to the great map on the wall, showing all of known space. Red markers indicated conflict zones. There were so many now that parts of the map glowed crimson. They called us warmongers, Baesung said softly. They said we were too aggressive, too violent, too dangerous. He traced his finger across the map. Let them see what peace without us looks like. On the distant world of Vethprim, the Mirathi homeworld, Counselor Veth faced problems of his own. The great council chambers where he had mocked the humans now stood half empty. Many delegates had returned to their homeworlds to deal with local crises. Those who remained blamed him openly for driving away humanity. You spat a delegate from the Velith. Your pride has doomed us all. Veth raised his chin. The humans were becoming too powerful. Someone had to stop them. Stop them from what? Helping us? Saving us. The Velith delegate threw a datapad at Veth's feet. My people are dying of plague. Human doctors could cure it in days. But there are no human doctors anymore, because you chased them away. Veth had no answer. He had expected the humans to protest, to argue, perhaps to threaten. He had never imagined they would simply leave. He had built his career on containing human influence. Now he was beginning to realize that human influence was the only thing holding the galaxy together in the chambers of High Speaker Olam. The old leader faced his own reckoning. A vote of no confidence had been called. Delegates who had supported the Restriction Act now pretended they had always opposed it. Everyone was looking for someone to blame. Olam knew the truth, even if he could not speak it aloud. The council had grown lazy and weak. They had let humans do the hard work while they enjoyed the benefits. They had convinced themselves they were the masters and humans were the servants. Now the servants were gone. And the masters discovered they could not even feed themselves. A message arrived from the Velith medical authorities. The plague was spreading. Without human xenomedicine, they estimated 2 million deaths within the month. They begged the council to do something. Olam had nothing to offer them. The council's own medical resources were primitive compared to human technology. They could send doctors, but those doctors would only watch people die. He drafted a message to Earth, swallowing his pride, asking if humanitarian aid might be possible despite the political separation. The response came back within hours. It was polite, formal, and devastating. Earth appreciated the Council's concern for its citizens. However, all human medical personnel were currently assigned to human colonies. Perhaps the Council could train its own doctors. Earth would be happy to sell them educational materials at standard market rates. The message was signed by a mid-level bureaucrat. The High Speaker of the Galactic Council had been answered by a clerk. Olam sat alone in his chambers as night fell over Vesa Prime. Through his window, he could see the stars that humans had helped them reach. The stations humans had built. The routes humans had mapped. He thought about all the times he had dismissed human concerns. All the times he had sided with the Mirathi to limit human growth. All the times he had nodded when others called humans useful but dangerous. Useful. That word echoed in his mind. They had reduced an entire species to a tool, and now they were shocked that the tool refused to be used, in the darkness of the outer veil. Warlord Dren gathered his forces for the next raid. He was a cruel creature, scarred and twisted, who had spent his life preying on the weak. For years, human patrols had kept him hiding in the shadows. Now there were no patrols. No human ships screaming out of the darkness with weapons blazing. No human marines boarding his vessels and dragging his crew to justice. The galaxy was soft and unprotected, like fruit waiting to be picked. Dren smiled his terrible smile and ordered his fleet forward. There were worlds to burn and treasures to steal, and no one left to stop him. Back on New Busan, General Bei soon watched the reports of Dren's latest atrocity. A small colony, burned to ash. 1,000 dead. Choi Era stood beside him, her face pale. We could stop him. One fleet. We could end this. Duh. Bei Sung shook his head. Not yet. They haven't learned yet. How many have to die before they learn? Bei Sung turned to face her, and for a moment, something like grief flickered in his eyes. I don't know, but I know this. If we go back now, nothing changes. They'll thank us, use us, and forget us again. The lesson has to burn deep enough that they never forget. He looked back at the stars, at the galaxy tearing itself apart. When they're ready to see us as equals, we'll return. Until then, let them remember what life was like before humans came. Choi Era said nothing. There was nothing to say. The silence stretched on. It's broken only by the distant sound of children laughing in the streets below. Human children, safe and happy, while the universe cried out for help that would not come. Not yet, but soon. For months after humanity walked away, the Galactic Council began to die. Ambassador Taeyuna stood at the window of her apartment in Seoul, Earth's ancient capital. The city sparkled below her, a river of lights flowing between towers that touched the clouds. Somewhere in the distance, children sang songs about the stars. Behind her, news feeds played on silent screens. 3 species had formally left the council this week. 5 more threatened to follow. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was crumbling like old stone. Secretary Yunhana entered without knocking. She was Taeyuna's protege, a young woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She carried a secure message pod in her hands.
Ambassador, you have a visitor.
She came in secret on an unmarked ship. Taeyuna turned. Who? Elder Sorim of the Velith. Taeyuna's expression did not change, but her heart beat faster. Elder Sorim was one of the oldest and most respected diplomats in the galaxy. She had served the council for over 200 years. If she had come in secret, she carried desperate words. I'll show her in. Elder Sorim entered slowly, leaning on a staff carved from the heartwood of her homeworld's sacred trees. Her gray skin had paled to almost white, and her dark eyes were heavy with exhaustion. She had aged decades in 4 months. Ambassador Tay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for receiving me. Taeyuna gestured to a chair. Please, sit. You look unwell. Sorim lowered herself carefully, wincing as old joints protested. The journey was long, and these old bones carry heavy burdens. She looked up at Taeyuna with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. I have come to beg. Taeyuna sat across from her. The Galactic Council does not beg. The Galactic Council is finished. Sorim's voice cracked. 3 species have already left. The Mirathi are in civil war. Raiders burn our colonies. Plague spreads through our worlds. We are dying, Ambassador. Slowly at first, but faster every day. She reached out and took Taeyuna's hand. Her grip was weak, trembling. Please, come back. Help us. Taeyuna looked at the ancient diplomat, at the tears forming in her dark eyes. She remembered standing in the Great Hall, watching these same species vote to chain humanity. Watching them applaud when Veth called her people servants. Elder Sorim, she said carefully, why should we? Sorim flinched as if struck. Because you are good. Because you have always helped those in need. Because... She stopped, searching for words that would not come. Taeyuna stood and walked to the window. For 87 years, we were good. We helped everyone. We asked nothing in return. She turned back to face Sorim. What did we receive? Suspicion, fear, chains. I know. I know we were wrong. Sorim struggled to her feet, leaning heavily on her staff. I voted against the Restriction Act. I argued against Veth, but I was not loud enough. I did not fight hard enough. Tears fell freely now. And now my people pay the price for my cowardice. The room fell silent, except for the old woman's quiet weeping. Yoon Hannah spoke softly from the doorway. Ambassador, The Parliament is waiting for your recommendation. Tayuna nodded slowly. She looked at Sareem, at the broken figure of a once-proud diplomat, and felt something shift in her heart. Left to make a point not to watch them burn. Yunhana's words from weeks ago echoed in her mind. She had been angry then. She was still angry now. But anger was a fire that consumed everything if left unchecked. Elder Sareem Tayuna said, "I will bring a proposal to Earth's Parliament. But I must be clear, we will not return as servants." Sareem looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "What do you want?" Tayuna walked to her desk and pulled out a document she had drafted in secret, in the dark hours when she could not sleep. A new treaty. Humanity will return to the galactic community, but not as members of the Council. We will be founding partners of a new galactic union, equal in every way, with veto power on any matter that affects human interests. Sareem read the document slowly, her eyes widening with each paragraph. This would give humans enormous power, no more than we deserve. Tayuna's voice was firm. "We have proven our worth 1,000 times over. We ask only to be recognized for what we have given." Sareem was quiet for a long moment. "The Mirathi will never accept this. The Mirathi are in civil war. Counselor Veth is being hunted by his own people." Tayuna smiled without warmth. "I don't think the Mirathi have a choice anymore." She extended her hand. "Take this proposal back to whoever still has authority. Tell them this is humanity's offer. Accept it, and we return. Reject it, and we wish you well." Sareem took the document with trembling hands. "And if they accept, you will truly come back." Tayuna looked out at the stars visible through her window. Somewhere out there, millions were dying. Colonies were burning. Children were crying for help that never came. She had wanted them to learn. She had wanted them to suffer. But there was a difference between teaching a lesson and watching the world burn. "If they accept," she said quietly, "we will come back. And this time, we will build something that cannot be broken. Something based on respect, not fear. Partnership, not servitude." Sareem clutched the document to her chest. "Thank you, Ambassador. I will make them understand. I will make them see." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "Why?" she asked. "After everything we did to you, why help us at all?" Tayuna considered the question. She thought of all the species who had looked down on humanity. All the insults, the dismissals, the quiet contempt. She thought of human soldiers dying for ungrateful allies. Human doctors healing those who despised them. "Because that's who we are," she said finally. "We help. We build. We protect. Not because others deserve it, but because it's right." She met Sareem's eyes. "You never understood that. You thought we served you because we were weak. We served because we were strong enough to choose kindness." Sareem bowed deeply, a gesture of respect that her people reserved for only the most honored. Then she walked out into the night. Carrying humanity's offer to a dying galaxy, Yunhana waited until the old woman was gone before speaking. "Do you think they'll accept?" "They have no choice." Tayuna sat heavily in her chair. "The question is whether they'll accept with grace or with resentment. Does it matter? Not to us. But it might matter to them in the years to come." Tayuna closed her eyes. A lesson learned in humility can become wisdom. A lesson learned in shame becomes poison. The news feeds continued their silent stream. Reports of battles. Reports of plagues. Reports of species turning against each other in their fear and desperation. Yunhana watched her mentor. Seeing the weight she carried, the burden of deciding the fate of billions. What if they don't accept? What if their pride is stronger than their fear? Tayuna opened her eyes. They were tired, sad, but also certain. Then we wait. We protect our own. We build our own future. She stood and looked out at the stars one more time. And we remember that pride is a luxury only the strong can afford. On the Mirathi homeworld, Counselor Veth hid in a basement while his people rioted in the streets above. They screamed his name like a curse. They burned his images. They tore down the statues he had built to celebrate his own glory. He had been the most powerful voice in the galaxy. Now he was a hunted animal, hiding in the dark. Listening to the world he had broken, tear itself apart, all because he had called the humans. Servants, all because he had laughed when he should have listened, in the ruins of the council chambers. High Speaker Olam received Elder Sareem's message and read the human proposal 3 times. His hands shook. His heart's hammered in his chest. It was surrender. Complete and total surrender to human demands. But as he read the reports from across the galaxy, as he watched the death tolls rise and the alliances crumble, he realized something he should have understood long ago. It was not surrender. It was salvation. And salvation, he now understood, always came with a price. 6 months after humanity walked away, they returned. The flagship Taiyang led the fleet, a massive vessel built like a silver blade cutting through the darkness of space. Admiral Kong Ho stood on its bridge, watching stars stream past the viewport. Behind him, 1,000 human ships followed in perfect formation. Medical vessels, supply freighters, engineering teams, peacekeeping forces, an army of helpers, returning to a galaxy that had finally learned to ask nicely. Admiral, his communications officer reported, were receiving transmissions from every sector. Welcoming committees. Thank you messages. Some of them are weeping. Kongho nodded slowly. Acknowledge them all. Tell them help is coming. The fleet split into dozens of groups, each heading to a different crisis zone. They had planned this operation for weeks, coordinating with surviving council authorities. Mapping out where the need was greatest, Captain Han Jae piloted the medical frigate Yunha toward the planet Sonara. Where he had left supplies and manuals 6 months ago, he wondered what he would find. The planet came into view, green and brown and beautiful. But as they descended through the atmosphere, Han Jae saw something that made his breath catch. Crowds. Thousands of people gathered at the landing field. Holding signs, waving flags, cheering, Governor Rethi stood at the front. Older now, thinner, but alive. Beside her stood the young doctors and engineers she had trained using the manuals Han Jae had left behind. They had kept the water systems running. They had fed their people. They had survived. The unit touched down, and Han Jae walked down the ramp to meet them. Rethi rushed forward and embraced him, tears streaming down her gray face. "You came back," she whispered. "You really came back." "We always planned to," Han Jae said. "We just needed you to stand on your own first." Rethi pulled back and looked at him with new understanding. "You were teaching us. Even when you left, you were teaching us," Han Jae smiled. "That's what friends do." On the plague-stricken Velith world, Dr. Park Mina led her medical teams into action. The disease had killed hundreds of thousands, but millions still lived, still fought, still hoped. Human doctors worked alongside Velith healers, sharing knowledge, teaching techniques, treating patients side by side. The cure spread faster than the plague ever had. An elderly Velith patient grabbed Mina's hand as she administered treatment. "We did not deserve your help," he said weakly. "We treated your people badly. We let them call you servants." Mina squeezed his hand gently. "You're sick. That's all that matters right now. But why?" The old man's eyes searched her face. "Why help those who hurt you?" Mina thought about it for a moment. "Because kindness isn't a transaction. We don't help people because they deserve it. We help because we can, and because helping is what makes us human." The old man closed his eyes, tears leaking from beneath his lids. "I think," he whispered, "we have much to learn from your people." On the Mirathi homeworld, Admiral Kong Ho oversaw the delivery of food and supplies to a population on the edge of starvation. The civil war had ended when Counselor Veth was captured by his own people and exiled to a prison moon far from any civilized world. The Mirathi, who remained, were humble now, their scales dull with hunger and shame. They accepted human help with bowed heads and quiet thanks. A young Mirathi child approached Kong Ho as he supervised the distribution of grain. She was small and thin, her scales barely beginning to show their adult colors. "Are you the human admiral?" she asked in a tiny voice. Tong Ho knelt down to her level. "I am," my father said. "Humans are evil." He said, "You wanted to conquer us." She tilted her head. "But you're giving us food?" Kong Ho smiled sadly. Your father was wrong. We never wanted to conquer anyone. We just wanted to help. Why? Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. Because Kong Ho said slowly, the universe is very big and very dark and very cold. The only way any of us survive is by helping each other. Your father forgot that. A lot of people forgot that. He put a gentle hand on her shoulder. But we remember. And now, maybe you will too. The child looked at him for a long moment and smiled and ran off to join her family in the food line. Kong Ho stood and watched her go, feeling something loosen in his chest. A tension he had carried for 6 months, finally beginning to ease in the rebuilt council chambers. Now renamed the Assembly Hall of the Galactic Union. The signing ceremony began. Ambassador Tae-Yuna stood at the central platform where she had once dropped her diplomatic pin. The chamber was full again, but the faces were different now. Humbled, hopeful, afraid but willing to try. High Speaker Olam approached her with the treaty in his hands. He had survived the no-confidence votes, the riots, the collapse. He looked like a man who had walked through fire and emerged, burned but alive. Ambassador Tae, he said formally, on behalf of all member species, I offer humanity this treaty of partnership. We acknowledge our past failures. We commit to a future of equality and mutual respect. He held out a silver pen, the same pen used to sign every great treaty in council history. Tae-Yuna took it, but did not sign immediately. Instead, she turned to face the assembled delegates, hundreds of species watching her with hope and fear. We never wanted to leave, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We wanted to be seen. You looked at us and saw tools, soldiers, workers. You never saw what we truly are. She paused, letting the silence build. We are builders. We take broken things and make them whole. We are healers. We take sick things and make them well. We are protectors. We stand between the innocent and the darkness. Her voice grew stronger. We do these things not because we must, but because we choose to. That choice, that willing gift of service, is the most human thing about us. She looked down at the treaty, at the words that would reshape the galaxy. Today, we return. Not because you begged, though you did. Not because we forgive everything, because we do not. We return because the galaxy is better with us in it, and now, finally, you know it too. She signed her name with a steady hand. The chamber erupted in cheers and tears, the release of 6 months of fear and uncertainty. Secretary Yoon Hana stood among the human delegation, watching her mentor accept the gratitude of 100 worlds. She felt pride swelling in her chest, pride for her species, for her people, for everything they had endured and overcome. Admiral Kong Ho joined her. His uniform crisp, his expression thoughtful. Do you think they've really learned? Yoon Hana asked. Kong Ho was quiet for a moment, watching the delegates celebrate, watching ancient enemies embrace, watching a galaxy take its first steps toward something new. Maybe, he said finally. Maybe not, but they'll never forget. And that's enough. The ceremony ended, and the work began. Human ships spread across the galaxy, bringing aid and hope to worlds that had nearly given up. Engineers repaired what was broken. Doctors healed what was sick. Teachers trained new generations to stand on their own. It would take years to undo the damage. Decades to build trust. Centuries, perhaps, to create the true partnership that the new treaty promised. But humanity had time. They had patience. They had the strength that comes from choosing to help even when it would be easier to walk away. On the bridge of the Taiyang, Admiral Kang Ho stood at the viewport and watched the stars stretch out before him. Somewhere out there, human families were settling on new worlds. Human children were learning new languages, making new friends, building new futures. Yoon Hana joined him, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She offered him one, and they stood together in comfortable silence. What now? She asked. Kong Ho sipped his tea and smiled. Now we do what we've always done. We help, we build, we protect, and if they forget again, If they take us for granted? Kong Ho considered the question. He thought of the suffering he had witnessed, the lessons he had taught, the price the galaxy had paid for its arrogance. Then we remind them, he said. As many times as it takes, turned from the viewport and walked toward the command center. Where new missions waited, new crises called. New opportunities to serve, Yunhana followed. Leaving the stars behind, there was work to do. There was always work to do, and humans, she thought with a smile, had never been afraid of work. The Taiyang turned toward the next world that needed help. Its engines humming with power, its crew ready for whatever came next. The galaxy watched them go. Grateful and humbled and just a little bit afraid, because now they understood what they had almost lost, and they would never, ever forget.